No, it's did you click on the red button?
Yes. How about now? Good. Good. Thank you, everyone, for your help with that. My name is Joel Veldkamp. I am the Geneva main representative of Christian Solidarity International, the principal sponsor of this event. I'd also like to thank our co-sponsors, the World Council of Churches, the Armenian Constitutional Right Protective Center, the Armenian Assembly of America, the Armenian Relief Society, and the European Center for Law and Justice. A few housekeeping details before we begin. Please note that according to UN rules, it is not permitted to take photographs of this event. CSI has two designated staff people here, my colleague in the blue shirt, who have been authorized to take photos of this event. Everyone else, please respect the rules and refrain from photography for the next hour. I'd also like to remind everyone that this event is being live streamed on CSI's YouTube channel, and it will be available as a recording there and on our website afterwards. The topic of our meeting here today is Human Rights in Azerbaijan, the Fate of Armenian Detainees. We meet on a somber anniversary. At this time last year, the forced exodus of the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh was in its final stages. It was the end of a 3-year-long campaign by the government of Azerbaijan to destroy the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh and dismantle the structures of self-rule that they had built there over the past 30 years. From the very first days of this ethnic cleansing campaign, one of the principal tools of terror that Azerbaijan employed was the taking of hostages. Today, as we meet here in Geneva, dozens of Armenians are still being held prisoner in Baku, including captured soldiers, political prisoners, and civilian abductees. The fate of these hostages must be at the center of any discussion about pathways to justice in the aftermath of the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh. Today, we are honored to have with us three of the leading advocates for these Armenian detainees. From the very beginning of the current crisis, they've been doing painstaking work to document human rights abuses against Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh and to keep the cases of the Armenian hostages in front of the international public. Today, they will present the cases of these detainees to us, inform us about the treatment of Armenian prisoners in detention in Azerbaijan, and explain how international human rights law bears on their cases. Our first speaker, far to my left, is Siranush Sahakian. She is the president of the Comparative and International Law Center in Yerevan, and she has represented the families of the Armenian detainees in the European Court of Human Rights and is the leading campaigner in Armenia for their release. Our second speaker, to the right of Siranush, is Hasmik Harutyunyan, a legal expert at the Protection of Rights Without Borders NGO in Yerevan. She has been involved in documenting human rights abuses in Nagorno-Karabakh all the way back to Azerbaijan's 2016 assault on the region. Our third speaker today, to my left, is Gergen Petrosyan. He is the chairman of the German Armenian Lawyers Association and an academic at the Friedrich Alexander Universität Erlangen-Nuremberg in Germany. He's been deeply involved in Armenia's process of accession to the International Criminal Court. I will be moderating our event today, and we will begin with a short statement by video from Mr. Gekham Stepanyan, the current Human Rights Ombudsman of the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, who continues his work in exile in Armenia. We will then hear from each of our three principal speakers for 10 minutes, and our colleague Thibault van den Bosch from the European Center for Law and Justice, on my far left, will make a closing statement, and then we will have time for questions from the floor. Before I hand the floor over to Gekham Stepanyan, I'd like to read a letter from Linda Uljekian, the wife of Viken Uljekian, who has been held prisoner by Azerbaijan for nearly 4 years now. Her letter reads, "I am writing to you as the wife of Viken Uljekian, on behalf of our family, to plead for your urgent intervention and assistance in securing his immediate release. Viken is an Armenian Lebanese citizen who was unlawfully detained in Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, by Azerbaijani soldiers in November 2020 and has been imprisoned in Azerbaijan ever since. Viken was wrongfully captured in Shushi, together with Maral Najarian, who has since been released, the day after the 2020 ceasefire agreement. He was later charged as an illegal mercenary, despite being a civilian, and was subjected to an unjust trial before the Baku military court. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison on fabricated charges. Last December, we were informed of the possibility that Viken would be among 32 prisoners of war to be released by the Azerbaijani government as part of a prisoner exchange. The news brought a glimmer of hope to our family, as we prepared for his return with great anticipation. However, on December 13, we were devastated to learn that although 32 prisoners were released, Viken was inexplicably swapped at the last minute for another prisoner. Like many others, Viken has endured unimaginable hardships in prison, and we fear his health is rapidly deteriorating under the conditions of his confinement. We implore you to use all available means to verify Viken's health and well-being and to advocate for his prompt release. His family, including myself, our children, and his loved ones, have endured immense suffering throughout these years, and we now fear for his life. It has been 3 months since I last spoke with Viken. I would kindly ask the International Committee of the Red Cross from Geneva, by all means, to pay a visit to Viken in order to see his condition. I humbly ask for your support in bringing Viken home to us so he can receive the medical care and emotional support he so desperately needs. We remain hopeful that with your assistance, justice will prevail and Viken will be reunited with his family. Sincerely, Linda Uljekian, wife of Viken Uljekian.
Dear colleagues, first of all, I apologize for not being able to personally attend the event, and I thank Christian Solidarity International for this initiative and for always being at the forefront of the protection of the rights of Nagorno-Karabakh people. I'm confident that my colleagues will provide a thorough overview of the rights of Armenian prisoners of war and hostages illegally held in Azerbaijan. With your permission, I would like to expand on this discussion by addressing the broader human rights challenges faced by the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, who were forcibly displaced due to Azerbaijani aggressions. In September 2023, after blockading Nagorno-Karabakh for 9 months, Azerbaijan launched an attack on the civilian population. This brutal assault resulted in hundreds of deaths and the forced displacement of 120,000 indigenous Armenians from their homeland. Today, I would like to focus on 4 key areas that remain the most pressing human rights challenges for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. The first priority is the humanitarian and socio-economic situation of forcibly displaced people in Armenia. Despite providing humanitarian aid, Armenia's limited resources have made it difficult to fully address all the needs. As a result, thousands of displaced people who found refuge in Armenia are struggling with poverty and numerous social and economic challenges. That's why it is of utmost importance for the international community to provide active support to Armenia for tackling the humanitarian problems of forcibly displaced persons. The second critical issue remains the preservation of Armenian cultural heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh. After ethnically cleansing Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan is systematically eradicating all traces of Armenian presence. Our monasteries, churches, sacred sites, and cemeteries are being desecrated and vandalized. Furthermore, we witness daily how the Azerbaijani government is seizing Armenian property, destroying our communities and homes, or illegally settling Azerbaijanis there. The vivid example is the destruction of Karintak community, which was populated by Armenians for centuries. This must be stopped. The third and vital issue is the safe and dignified return of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to their homes. With unwavering conviction, we assert that every individual displaced from Artsakh wishes to return. I want to emphasize that we are talking about a collective, safe, and dignified return, which must be unconditionally connected with the right to self-determination. This right of return is fundamental and has been affirmed by the order of the UN International Court of Justice. Therefore, we insist that the issue of return must be a component of any peace negotiations in the region. And of course, the fourth issue is the fate of Armenian prisoners of war and hostages illegally held in Azerbaijan. Since the 2020 war, Azerbaijan has exploited this issue for political gain, using it as a bargaining chip to extract concessions from Armenia. This blatant disregard for international humanitarian and human rights law is unacceptable. I would like to highlight the cases of Bagif Khachaturian, an elderly resident of Nagorno-Karabakh, kidnapped by Azerbaijani authorities from the hands of the ICRC. David Davtyan and Gevorg Sujan, civilians abducted while delivering humanitarian aid to Nagorno-Karabakh, and the military political leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh illegally detained in Baku. These are just a few examples of the many individuals held captive in Azerbaijan. The stories of persons illegally detained in Azerbaijan are different as they are the same. Today, they are subjected to the arbitrariness of the Azerbaijani dictatorial authorities exclusively for being Armenians. Given the documented brutality of Azerbaijani authorities towards prisoners, it is clear that there is no effective mechanism in place to protect the rights of those detained in Azerbaijani prisons. Both we and international institutions lack access to objective information about their conditions. Moreover, it is evident that legal means alone are insufficient to secure their release or effective right protection. Hence, the main tool remains strong international pressure on Azerbaijan that will compel Azerbaijani authorities to release all illegally detained Armenians from Azerbaijani jails. Dear all, together with my colleagues, we raise these issues on various platforms, and this forum is particularly important in amplifying our voices. Unfortunately, with the world's current instability and numerous challenges, our concerns often go unheard. Now more than ever, we need organizations and individuals committed to human rights to advocate for these critical issues and help us be heard. Azerbaijan's permissiveness and impunity must be stopped in order to prevent new aggressions and large-scale violations of human rights in the region. Azerbaijan must be held accountable for its aggressive and criminal behavior, and it is in these matters that we expect your support. Thank you once again for this opportunity.
I now give the floor to Madam Siranush Sahakian.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. After the 44-day Azerbaijani aggression against Artsakh in 2020, a trilateral agreement was signed on November 9 between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia. This agreement explicitly called for the exchange of prisoners of war, hostages, and other detained individuals, as well as the repatriation of the remains of those who perished. Despite this agreement, Azerbaijan continues to defy its obligations. Illegal blockade resulted in a new aggression in 2023 and forced deportation. Existential threats still persist against Armenians. Even more troubling is that Azerbaijan continues to unlawfully detain 23 individuals, and this includes 6 civilians, 9 prisoners of war, and 8 high-profile figures of Artsakh, including presidents, former state minister, philanthropist Ruben Vartanyan. Juan Mendes, the first UN Special Advisor on Genocide Prevention, has made it clear that targeting the leadership of a vulnerable community is indicative of a genocide. It signals an intent to destroy a community, particularly when paired with the mass deportation of its members. Beyond these 23 detainees, there are over 80 documented cases of captivity which remain unacknowledged as of this day by Azerbaijani government. So these people were subjected to forced enforced disappearances, which amounts to war crime, and families are left in uncertainty. Despite the denial from Azerbaijan, there are verified evidence and supporting documents confirming the captivities, and I would like to share 2 cases as an example to show what has happened. So the first case is Alexander Yeryazaryan's case, who is a serviceman and was captured on October 21. after an ambush by Azerbaijani forces. Along with 3 other servicemen, he was captured. While his fellow captives have been repatriated, his fate remains uncertain. One of the repatriated servicemen recounted that they were blindfolded and taken to a location where they were subjected to beatings and verbal abuse. This torture continued during their transfer to Baku and upon arrival in closed institutions. A year after his capture, a video surfaced on Azerbaijani Telegram channels showing Alexander Yeghazarian and at least one of other Armenian servicemen. He was shirtless and with his hands bound behind his back, was surrounded by Azerbaijani soldiers. So we'll watch the video. Yes. Yeah, so another separate video, again showing an Azerbaijani serviceman slapping Alexander while holding a bayonet, which is a further evidence of his abuse while captivity. Another case relates to civilians, Maxim Grigorian and Karen Petrosyan. They were from the village of Avetaranots. They were captured by Azerbaijani soldiers and taken to a forest. Again, these 2 civilians were with Karen Petrosyan, and in a footage, Azerbaijani soldier can be heard asking the captives in Azerbaijani whether they were ready to live in Azerbaijan. Karen and Maxim do not participate in a conversation, and there is another person, Valery Petrosyan, who was repatriated, and he confirmed that he appears in a video alongside with Karen and Maxim. So 3 civilians are clearly seen in this video. Videos are verified, their identities are verified, repatriated civilian also provided testimony, but still no actions taken by Azerbaijani side. Azerbaijan also demonstrated a history of exploiting prisoners of war as bargaining chips. POWs have been traded for minefield maps, the return of convicted Azerbaijani criminals, even political concessions such as hosting high-level conferences. This clear pattern of using human lives as diplomatic leverage is deeply concerning. Additionally, legal proceedings are brought against Armenian detainees, and those trials fail to meet international fair trial standards. They are marked by procedural flaws, an automatic presumption of guilt, absence of witness testimonies, inadequate legal representation, and most importantly, a lack of impartial and independent tribunals. Those Armenians have no access to consular, no right to consular access, no access to international independent bodies with torture prevention mandates, and no access to international legal counsel, which further erodes their right to a fair trial. Interestingly, the judges presiding over Armenian cases have a history of politically motivating rulings. For example, one of the judges is Afghan Hajiev, and in 2015, Hajiev sentenced prominent human rights activists Arif and Leyla Yunus to lengthy prison terms on fabricated charges, highlighting the lack of judicial independence in Azerbaijan. These trials often are based on false evidence, coerced confessions, and these trials must be seen in a broader context of state-sponsored hatred against Armenians, which continues to fuel ethnically motivated prosecutions. The 8 high-profile representatives of Artsakh currently detained in Azerbaijan face serious criminal charges, yet the core elements of these allegations have no reasonable basis in the existing facts. Their arrest is accompanied by stigmatizing statements from public officials who label them as terrorists, which is a clear attempt to delegitimize their activities in Artsakh. So forward to COP29, we urge to raise this unresolved humanitarian issue and pressure Azerbaijan to release all Armenian hostages. Without resolution of humanitarian issues, there cannot be any trust toward peace building. At this point, I will hand over to my colleague who will further discuss the treatment of Armenian prisoners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to talk now about the conditions of Armenian prisoners of war in Azerbaijan and the treatment by Azerbaijani authorities. The monitoring of footage posted on social media, as well as the interviews conducted with repatriated prisoners of war and civilians, and study of available open source information reveal that prisoners of war, both military and civilians, were subjected to torture, ill treatment, and degrading treatment, causing them grave suffering or injury to body and health while in Azerbaijani custody. There is plenty of evidence demonstrating how prisoners of war are being beaten, mocked, and humiliated upon capture by members of Azerbaijani armed forces during transfer to all types of detention facilities while in custody in Azerbaijan. We have examined dozens of videos showing Azerbaijani soldiers slapping, kicking, hitting and prodding, threatening to mutilate the prisoners of war and compelling them, under obvious duress and with the apparent intent to humiliate them, to kiss the Azerbaijani flag, swear at the Armenian Prime Minister, and declare that Karabakh is Azerbaijan. The videos not only feature scenes of humiliation, intimidation, physical violence, and insults, but also the mistreatment of the bodies of killed Armenian servicemen. The videos, moreover, showed the sexual abuse against Armenian servicewomen. We conducted also interviews with repatriated prisoners of war who were detained in 2020, who reported about being subjected to such treatment, starting from their capture and up until their repatriation. The interviewed former prisoners of war have told that starting from the capture until their transfer to prison, they were subjected to beatings. Their skin was burnt by cigarettes. Those who had cross-sign tattoos, their skin was especially burnt. Some of them were subjected to electric shock, were forced to stay in the same position for hours. They were poured with cold water while sleeping. There existed special beating groups who beat the prisoners regularly a couple of times during the day, and beatings with special batons until they lost consciousness. When they came to consciousness, they started beating them again. Wounded prisoners of war also reported being ill-treated by medical personnel, including while in hospital. In several instances, those having injuries in their legs were forced to stand on that leg for hours. On some of the videos taken by Azerbaijani servicemen themselves in September 2022, it is clearly seen that wounded prisoners of war are not treated. On the contrary, Armenian servicemen with bleeding wounds have their hands tied behind their backs, lying on the ground and breathing with difficulty. Beating and abuse took place mostly when they were transferred from place to capture to temporary command places set by Azerbaijani military. Upon capture, Azerbaijani servicemen tied their hands with a zip tie or plastic rope that in some cases remained on their hands for several days. As a result, their hands were swollen. We have established that the use of plastic zip ties or ropes by Azerbaijani servicemen were common. Some of them reported that person who introduced themselves as their lawyers, handed over some paper in Azerbaijan for signature, also tried to convince them to denounce the Armenian citizenship and stay in Azerbaijan. Prison guards told them that Armenia was not willing to repatriate them. Some of the interviewed prisoners of war also reported that Azerbaijan servicemen logged into their social media networks and posted content, including videos with their statements made under pressure. 19-year-old Arman, the name is changed, recounts. At their command point, Azerbaijani servicemen surrounded me. Some of these men didn't speak Russian, but showed with gestures that they would cut my throat. One of the men showed 7 fingers and a throat-cutting gesture. I understood that he had cut the throats of 7 people. I thought they would do the same with me. They started beating me. They didn't care about my wound. If the commander didn't show up in time and order not to abuse me, I would have been killed now. All interviewed repatriated prisoners of war reported that they were subject to beatings also at the premises of the military police. In particular, older prisoners of war were treated worse than younger ones for their alleged participation in the First Karabakh War. Some of the interviewed prisoners of war stated that they were threatened that all those captured Armenians would have to pay for everything happened yet in 1990s. The interviewees reported that the initial phase of their captivity by Azerbaijan servicemen, up until the transfer to prison, they received no food or in small portions. In some cases, during the first 4 to 5 days, Armenian captives were provided with no food, they made them serve. Besides information obtained from interviews, the footage posted on social media on different periods of timing during the 44-day war and after that shows different groups of captured persons in Armenian military uniform, which, based on already presented reliable evidence, have been subjected to the same or similar treatment. Numerous civilians have been taken as hostages by the Azerbaijani military in the course of military activities. The evidence again shows that Azerbaijan took hostage and held captive civilians who were unable or unwilling to leave their homes and villages, even though they posed no security threat. Moreover, the evidence shows that during such captivity, civilians were either killed, including through decapitation while alive and tortured to death, or were subjected to torture and ill treatment by beating, cutting their ears. It should be mentioned also that the same practice was revealed also during the blockade of 2023. During the blockade, many Ankara residents, including those in need of medical assistance, were hesitant to cross the checkpoint due to the fear of being abducted. The interviews conducted with Ankara residents after being forcibly displaced revealed that those under Azerbaijani custody were ill-treated and beaten. A civilian having mental disabilities was beaten even by medical staff, being kicked in the head. The presented practices of ill treatment and widespread publication of footage with relevant information on social media also aimed to create an atmosphere of fear and terror among the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh, subject to severe psychological suffering as to their fate if they stayed in Azerbaijan. Under Azerbaijani control, pushing them to live with no possibility of return to their homes, an objective that Azerbaijan managed to achieve in September 2023, following a 9-month-long blockade, large-scale military attack, and forced displacement of the entire local ethnic Armenian population. Until now, we are witnessing the continuation of the long-standing criminal behavior and human rights abuses by Azerbaijan, which is nourished by impunity. Azerbaijani authorities have failed to conduct effective investigation of allegations of torture and other forms of ill treatment, bring perpetrators to justice, and combat absolute impunity. The lives of all ethnic Armenians held in captivity in Azerbaijan are in grave danger, and they are exposed to a significant risk of torture and ill treatment. I thank you.
Should I continue? So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the organizers giving us the floor. Speaking about the current situation, what I'm going to do in my speech, I'm going to show you the legal framework that is applicable in this particular situation, and what exactly has been already said by my co-panelists I will try to give you the possible solutions for the accountability. I will go through very quickly through introduction. I will show you the international legal framework, especially from the criminal perspective. I will show you some selected cases in order to show you this big picture that is happening on the international crimes level, and of course the crimes against humanity in the sense of the deportation. And I will conclude with some points. Well, everybody of us have seen this picture from last year of mass deportation, exodus of Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. Many of my colleagues are asking, but this is a voluntarily leaving of Armenians, which is not true. Behind of this picture, it is of course not possible to see the real grounds of fleeing the Nagorno-Karabakh, because this was not voluntarily, it was forced, because the people, the videos that we have seen already, forced the people to flee from the Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, not only the videos that were circulating, but I will come to that in a second. So we have the first escalations that we have experienced is, of course, in 2016, that where some war crimes have been committed in 2016, such as also beheadings. And also, again, these beheadings and war crimes were filmed and circulated in social media platforms. Then we have 2020, 44 days, where we have again experienced massive violence against the Armenians on the battlefield, in the villages, against the civilians, against the civilian population. And of course, with the trilateral agreement that has been mentioned by Ms. Sahakian, didn't also finish the escalation. It continued also during 2021 and 2022 during the different clashes. And of course, it lasted to a blockade, and the blockade to the exodus. So we have, on the international level, we have different conventions that show what kind of violations have been committed. On the human rights perspective, we see the huge list of human rights that have been violated by the Azerbaijani authorities. But on the other side, these international crimes that have been committed, such as the torture, unlawful detention, and forced disappearance, willfully depriving a prisoners of war of a protected person of the rights of fair and regular trial, and of course, deportation and persecution as crimes against humanity. Well, everybody of us knows the Nuremberg Principle 1. It says that any person who commits an act which constitutes a crime under international law is responsible and liable to punishment. This is a principle that has been developed from the Nuremberg judgment, and I think this is one of the important points to mention, because this impunity brings to repetition of these crimes. This happened in 2016, this happened in 2020, this is happening also now against the prisoners of war and hostages. And because of this impunity, it still continues, and we need to find a solution of stopping, to bringing these perpetrators before the justice. And we have here two possible ways. One is the universal jurisdiction, and another one is the International Criminal Court, where Armenia became a member, fully member to the ICC starting from the 1st February 2024. So on the universal jurisdiction, we have lots of European countries that have incorporated these principles within their criminal systems. But of course, it's important to mention that these countries should have also political will. These perpetrators are traveling around the world. They travel to the different European countries, and of course, it is obligation of the national authorities to monitor those perpetrators and to bring them before the justice, before their own courts. We have experienced that already in different other conflicts, and I think this is also important that this principle applies also on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Well, on the International Criminal Court level, the jurisdiction, of course, a little bit different. The territorial scope of Nagorno-Karabakh does not fall within the ICC jurisdiction generally, but as soon as we have already a decision, a jurisprudence from the ICC mentioning the Bangladesh and Myanmar situation, where the Rohingya population were forced to flee from the non-state party to a state party, it opens the jurisdiction of the ICC to look at that particular situation. This is something that falls within the jurisdiction of the ICC in Armenian situation, but of course the crimes that have been committed on the Armenian territory also fall under the jurisdiction of the ICC. All other crimes outside of these two particular situations fall under the universal jurisdiction. It means in Germany, Sweden, France, Switzerland may apply the universal jurisdiction on the crimes committed. Now I'll turn to some selected cases in order to show that these are not just isolated cases. They have a clear pattern of international crimes committed. On the picture, you see two civilians that have been captured by the Azerbaijani authorities, Benika Kopyan and Yuri Adamyan. They were brought to the Hadrut city square, where they're demonstratively been executed. You can see in the picture the flags, Armenian flags, hang on them. This is, of course, a sign that not just these particular victims were selected, not particularly these civilians were selected in order to be executed, but just not because of their personality, but because of their membership to the Armenian group. So this demonstration of this footage, execution, and filming this shows that actually any Armenian being captured by the Azerbaijanis would actually have the same fate as these victims had. Another victim shows another victim that was beheaded in Dorf Azokh, in the village Azokh, Yuri Asiryan. He was unable to leave the village because of health issues, and then he was captured and again beheaded before the camera, he was filmed by being beheaded. And one of the perpetrators were also identified here in picture, who gives the knife to the direct perpetrator of committing international crime, a war crime. Another picture, another video that shows the different prisoners of war that have been captured, filmed, and again in the next scene you see them being executed in the field. There is about 20 a group of 60 prisoners of war, 60 soldiers. 25 were captured by the Azerbaijani authorities and then executed later in the field. This is, of course, not only against the men, but also against the women soldiers and also civilians. Here you can see one of the female soldiers that was captured by the Azerbaijani soldiers and then forced to make a show before the camera how she greets the Azerbaijani soldiers as liberators in the city. But you can see she covers with blankets, and because a grenade was hanging around her neck, she was forced to do that in order to show to be as a source of psychological warfare. This is another case shows the execution of different other prisoners of war already on the Armenian territory, committed in 2022. Again, a group of prisoners of war were captured and then demonstratively from the very close range were executed. Another female soldier who was mutilated, the body of the soldier was very cruelly mutilated. I will not go now into the details in order not to, of course, the picture is also not allowed to show here, but this is, again, the way of communication, the way of videotaping this and then showing in the social media platforms, making stickers, making fun of these drastic pictures, show how much hate there is. Of course, this all footages is not only the crimes have been committed there. We don't have also a lot other videotapes or filmings, because we are in the field, in the battlefield. Not every war crime has been recorded, but you can see here in the particular map is the way of advancing an offensive of the Azerbaijani soldiers on the Nagorno-Karabakh territory. All points just show where exactly the war crimes committed against whom they were committed. Now I turn to the deportation issue. Of course, we know that deportation is not only a physical deportation. You don't need to put people into the trains, send somewhere. The deportation is based also on the coercion, the atmosphere of coercion. So, because of fear of violence, duress, detention, psychological oppression, or abuse of power against such person or persons and other persons, by taking advantage of coercive environment. The video, these messages, of course, posted in the social media, gives this message to the receiver, the person who watches that video, that he is actually the next, and if he is being captured by the soldiers, by the special forces, the same fate will be actually with him. Now I turn to another topic. If the deportation falls under the ICC jurisdiction, and I hope that one day the ICC will open preliminary examination in this particular situation. But on the universal jurisdictional issues, it's also important to mention that deportation as crimes against civilian population, an attack against widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population, is not only just deportation. There were enforced disappearances. There were the arbitrary imprisonments, unlawful imprisonments of the leaders of the Nagorno-Karabakh, and also being tortured there, persecuted because of their membership to Armenian group, constitutes the crimes against humanity as such. I hope I can dive a little bit more in our Q&A session, but it's important that the international community takes the growing impunity surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh very seriously, and each unpunished international crime increases the risk of repetition of a wave of violence. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petrosian. Mr. van den Bosch from the European Center for Law and Justice, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joel, and Christian Solidarity International for your kind invitation to the European Center for Law and Justice to host this conference with you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now 1 year since the fall of Nagorno-Karabakh, the forced exile and ethnic separation of 120,000 Armenians, and the arbitrary, degrading, and inhuman detention of over 100 Nagorno-Karabakh who remain imprisoned to this day. It has also been a year of systematic destruction of Armenian Christian heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh, its erasure and denial of the millennia-old Armenian presence, all under the passive gaze of the international community. The report we made about it is to be found on our website, eclj.org. Azerbaijan joined the Council of Europe in 2001. Since then, Azerbaijan has been condemned 263 times by the European Court of Human Rights, including 3 times for torture and 30 times for inhuman and degrading treatment. This is only the visible part of the iceberg, referring to the cases that managed to exhaust all domestic remedies and reach the ECHR's verdict. Azerbaijan does not respect any of the commitments it made when joining the Council of Europe. Forget about the principles of pluralistic democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. With Azerbaijan, it is all about gas, oil, caviar diplomacy, fake news about France's inability to host the Olympic Games, or support for the independence of its overseas territories, and of course, unfortunately, serious violations of fundamental freedoms. The inability to conduct free and fair elections, as seen during the presidential elections on February 7, led to the suspension of its delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. In 2017, a delegation of the European Committee of the Prevention of Torture, which visited several prisons in Azerbaijan, reported shocking testimonies. I quote, "The types of alleged ill treatment include slaps, punches, kicks, blows with batons, hits inflicted with a wooden stick, a chair leg, a baseball bat, a plastic bottle filled with water, or a thick book." There were also numerous allegations of more severe forms of ill treatment, including torture, such as baton blows to the soles of the feet, often while the person was suspended, and electric shocks, including the use of electric discharge weapons. End of the quotation. In this context, it is paradoxical to see Azerbaijan preparing to host major international events such as COP29. The COP of peace that Azerbaijan promotes sharply contrasts with the repressive practices documented in the country. Azerbaijan does not deserve to preside over a conference of such international importance, and nations that have promoted this choice are complicit in not only washing Azerbaijan's atrocities, but also they are complicit in its greenwashing. Regarding the legal framework, Azerbaijan violates not only the European Convention on Human Rights, it also violates the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, of which it is a state party, and international humanitarian law, especially the Geneva Conventions. The catastrophic detention conditions affect not only Armenian prisoners, but also Azerbaijani citizens, critical of the government and foreigners. It is currently confirmed that Azerbaijan has detained at least 23 Armenian hostages from Nagorno-Karabakh since September 2023, among more than 100. Among them are former presidents and ministers of the Autonomous Republic. But it is more broadly Armenian citizens who are in danger, abducted when they get too close to the border, accused of espionage and terrorism, and who die in Azeri prisons, drawing the condemnation of the ECHR on Azerbaijan sure of its impunity. Political opponents suffer the same dramatic fate, like academic Gubad Ibadoglu, arrested in July 2023, provoking a reaction from the European Parliament, or like Anar Mamadli, arrested in April 2024. Finally, let us highlight Azerbaijan's overt attack against France in response to its support for Armenia. In September 2024, French citizen Théo Claire was sentenced to 3 years in prison for making a graffiti in the Baku metro. A disproportionate, arbitrary, and discriminatory sentence, especially since his co-defendants of Australian and New Zealand nationality only received symbolic fines of 3,500 euros, like Théo Claire received also. In conclusion, this is why the European Center for Law and Justice demands the right to safe and free return of Armenians to Nagorno-Karabakh, the release of Armenian prisoners, political prisoners, and foreigners, and at the very least, the cessation of torture, and also the protection of Armenian Christian heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van den Bosch, and thank you to all of our fantastic speakers. You've given us a lot to think about, very troubling presentations, but also very pertinent. And now we turn the floor over to you. If there are questions or comments, you're welcome to make them at this time. Please limit yourself to 1 minute. I will try to, oh, that's too many. So you'll have 1 minute to make your question or comment, and we'll get an answer from one of our panelists for you. So please, Mr. Yes.
Thank you very much to the speakers. I wanted to ask you, being that it is so blatant, the violation of human rights, I think that the possibility to raise these issues during the COP29 in the next November would be for the international community a unique possibility to do that. All the violations that you mentioned are very clearly shown that these states can bring these issues in front of the international community. Do you had a possibility to encounter some of these states or to make clear to many states that this violation can be issued in front of the General Assembly and on the COP29? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. So basically in our advocacy work with different delegations, we raised this question. So we urge the governments to discuss this unresolved issue of return of Armenian hostages and then to revisit their cooperation with Azerbaijan. And again, we are frequently discussing this peace and justice, justice with peace, or peace without justice. We reiterate that without justice, there is no room for peace. And in interstate relations, without having humanitarian issues resolved, you cannot build trust and give meaning to any document signed between the countries. So this is a precondition to achieve a real efforts towards the peace.
Thank you, Siranush. Is there another question from the floor? Yes, sir.
My name is Boris Engelson. I am a local journalist freelance, and I assume, unfortunately, all what you told us is true, although for a journalist it's always very imprudent to see the right and wrongs only on the basis of one side. I have attended also side events from the other side saying that in spite of the immense sympathy the Armenian people enjoy since the horror of 100 years back, the right and wrong in Nagorno-Karabakh might not be 100% on one side. But still, my question is not the following. I have been informed of this meeting by the ACANU, the Association of Correspondents in the Palais. And I understand, maybe I'm wrong, that I am the only journalist attending. And this is one of the issues. What you say is true, and it has been going on for years. So if it cannot be stopped, maybe there is a relation with the fact that some causes attract more attention than others. So why is it that in spite of the sympathy that the Armenian people enjoy, there is only one journalist in the room to listen to your complaints?
If I understand you correctly, you're questioning about the evidence that we've shown to you. Well, this evidence is...
My question is not on the evidence. I believe 100% your evidence, although I assume that on some points the other side might also have evidence. But I believe your evidence, and I am horrified. But I understand that in 1924 it is very difficult to attract support for these kind of causes. And I have had a friend the other day attending the Human Rights Council for a totally different issue. He asked me, after all, are all these meetings useful? Do they help the victims? And this is a question we more and more have when attending both the plenaries and the side events.
Yeah, I think the question is clear, sir. The question is, why is there so little media attention for this particular crisis?
And how to manage what we have.
Okay.
This is quite political question. We are lawyers here. We believe in international law. We believe that these instruments may be applied in different institutions, the different mechanism. We believe that independent to the fact if there is other conflicts, or it is also not possible to compare the conflicts with each other because every pain of the victim is unique, and it's very cruel that this kind of conflicts all over the world are happening in 21st century after coming to the conclusion that never again, but we were witnessing all over again these conflicts happening in different parts of the world, but we cannot measure which conflict is more severe or less severe. We as lawyers, we brought the evidence, we showed you what has been committed, and we believe that the international community will address also this particular evidence accordingly in different other institutions. So this is my point. I will not go maybe more in the politics.
Thank you for your question. As you mentioned about the evidence, I would like to bring a couple of examples and highlight that all the information that was presented on all treatment, torture, all this information is corroborated and consistent with not only the testimonies that we gathered from previous prisoners of war, but also taken by the perpetrators from the videos, widespread evidence spread on social media. And most importantly, the practice of systemic ill treatment is also corroborated by the findings of reports of Human Rights Ombudsman, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and other open source investigations conducted by international media. This is very important to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello,
yes,
Pierre-Alexandre Salier from La Tribune de Genève, journalist. Two questions. The first one is, what are the latest details you can share about the fate of Ruben Vardanyan? And the second one is, has the International Red Cross any access to any prisoners in Baku? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. At this point, ICRC visits the acknowledged prisoners that are held in Baku. However, we can discuss the regularity. We witnessed instances when prisoners were refused to use their possibility of a conversation, phone conversation with families, and no explanation was given why. But we know that delays in securing access to ICRC was a problem at the initial stages of captivity. For example, we have a case where the captivity was confirmed only after 6 months of incommunicado detention. And within these 6 months, there was no information about the whereabouts of a victim. Obstacles were put for proper activities of ICRC. However, at this point, there are regular visits once per month. In terms of the question about the fate of or conditions in terms of Ruben Vardanyan, just to make you become aware that interim measures were applied in the context of interstate case, Armenia versus Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan is under legal obligation to provide detailed information about conditions, health, other circumstances of Armenians to the European Court. Again, we have witnessed delays in providing information, and sometimes we encounter non-substantive information, so very formal information without providing evidence-based factual information about conditions. So the quality of provided information by Azerbaijani government is questionable. And this information is being shared by the families. Unfortunately, they are not subject to publication to the extent they are needed for legal proceedings. We use this information within our efforts of victim representation. About Ruben Vardanyan case, as you know, international lawyers brought an action before a special rapporteur on torture. So they are raising allegations about treatment during his detention. And apart from that, another complaint is brought before UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. So the existence of communication with a special rapporteur itself telling data that torture and ill treatment happened during this detention period.
Okay, in order to respect our time and to respect the next group, I'm afraid we have to draw this event to an end, but please stick around, meet our speakers outside in the hallway. We'll be happy to talk to you and to meet you all. Thank you very much for coming, and we wish you an excellent day.